Hi, everyone, and welcome to our August launch event. We're really excited for this launch for a variety of reasons. Not only does Tonic have a wealth of new capabilities to give you more flexibility in your test data workflows, these capabilities also represent the beginnings of a shift in our roadmap, in which we're branching into new areas of software testing and kind of meeting the broader needs of development teams. More on that when we get to our product roadmap toward the end of the webinar. But first, I'd like to introduce you to our speakers today. Very happy to be joined by Kasey, our VP of Product, who will present and demo our latest releases, and Paige Whittemore, one of our customer success managers, who's going to provide some more stories around how our customers are getting value out of each area of the platform. And I'm Kiara Columbi. I'm the head of marketing here at Tonic, and as always, very happy to be your host and to help field your questions along the way. Like I always say, we love questions, so please do feel free to chime in at any time with your questions. You can post them in the Q&A or in the chat, and I'll make sure our speakers see them as they come up. All right, Kasey, it's all yours.
Okay, and like I said, everything this past 5 months has kind of been around this theme of flexibility, adapting to your environment. I think there's like a number of ways that our customers can be snowflakes. You know, it's like everybody has their own nuance, and that could be with your data, where it's stored. It could be your database environment. It might be more complex and have a lot more pieces and other use cases besides what you're using Tonic for going on. You have different people and roles. You have rules that govern your data and policies. And so we're going to get into all those kind of flavors of flexibility today. Really excited to kick it off with the file connector. So the file connector is the easiest way to get started with Tonic. Historically, Tonic's always worked on a source database, and we will move that data while de-identifying it in flight to your destination. But what if you don't have your data in a database for some reason? Paige will get into some reasons why that might be. But basically with the file connector is we do the database management for you. So we allow you to just upload a file to get started. We'll put it into the database, index it, and make sure you can still do all of the same database-like operations on it to de-identify and establish relationships in your data, things like that, and then Generator will return it back to you as the file input that you gave it to us. This could be CSV, it could be like an Excel, like tab separated file, XML, JSON. And so it's pretty easy. The way that we do it, we have this concept of a file group. That's where all files of like type are kind of like one schema that will be like grouped together. And it's sort of like a table. You know, in Tonic, you operate on a table, which is a bunch of rows. With the file connector, you operate on a file group, which is a bunch of documents. And each one has the same columns and field types, and you can do your same de-identification as normal. So Paige, I wonder if you could add a little bit of color of like, why is this useful in the real world? You know, kind of what scenarios this might look like where customers have files.
Yeah, happy to. I think exactly as you said, Kasey, the need to create the file connector was really born from speaking with our customers who had sensitive information, so PII or PHI, stored in other places that are not just a standard database that Tonic supports. For me, one customer in particular that comes to mind is a healthcare customer of ours who receives patient data in client files from their direct partners. These files contain a wide range of information from admissions information, clinical supplies information, really just a whole wide range. And all of that information in those files needs to be ingested into their backend pipelines to inform testing for the clinical application that stores that information. So with Tonic's file connector, they were able to create replicas of these production files. So they now no longer need to use either the true production files that have a risk of leaking that sensitive information, or to create, static dummy files themselves that don't necessarily reflect the complexity or nuance of the true files themselves. So for this customer, it's really driven their developers to be able to separate code issues from data issues and ultimately improve the development of their application over time. Besides this one particular healthcare customer, I would say we've also seen other customers enabling new teams internally with the file connector. So for example, if a team's interested in using Tonic, if they're not yet spun up with a particular database type, they can take an extract of their data in a file format and then start processing it through Tonic. So a much lower lift and great way to start training folks on how to use Tonic. And that mitigates the need to have to go through, potential approvals to connect to a true production system. So really just a great way to expand usage and increase compliance for de-identified data in all areas of their pipeline.
Yeah, it's kind of both ends of both just sort of trial and getting started, but it's also, a new way of thinking about your testing pipeline. Like your testing pipeline doesn't look just one way, and it might actually have an ingestion process with files that they're getting from their own customers with sensitive data. And again, like for same use cases as core Tonic to like enable offshore developers, for example, that they need to look at and process these files for some reason, but maybe don't need access to that sensitive information. So I'm going to show getting started with a file connector. So I have a
before you
free
jump
trial. Oh, go ahead.
Quick question for you. Is there an API for the file upload?
That's a very good question. I'd have to check on that, but I believe so, just because it's similar to the rest of Tonic. Like you would have to host it with the workspace configuration. Yeah, I'm not sure on that. I'd have to check on that. If there's not an API endpoint, we could definitely add one. I know there was some talk about customers using APIs with respect to file connector, so I'd have to see exactly what endpoints. But
I'll see if I can answer. And yeah. Okay, cool.
I'm going to get started just to show you how you do it. So it says it's a type of workspace. So the workspace is the connection between your data sources in Tonic. So that can be any of our supported databases, or as you can see, we now have files. Now, for the trial accounts, we only have the option for local file system, but you could have these files stored in an S3 bucket in AWS. You could have it in GCP. You know, we support a number of different platforms there. So those files might be coming from a range of different sources. So for here, I'm going to do file system. And like I said, you create a file group, and I'm going to add a couple of privacy report documents. So it's very meta. These are privacy exports from Tonic, and I've uploaded them, and I get that preview right here. So it's kind of very similar to core Tonic, where, you know, we get a really user-friendly tool to explore and inspect your data using from database or DBA-like tools without having to get into, you know, Database Explorer, those kinds of things. So now I've got my files, they look great. And it would tell me if I had schemas that didn't match, I would get notified right here that those columns were not the same and they weren't eligible to be part of the same file group. So it does that check, that schema check here for you. Once they're uploaded, now I can actually go to database view and view my columns. So these are the names of my columns. I can add, you know, my normal generators. I can add categorical, things like that. I can even preview what the output would be. So I'm gonna get the rest of the workflow just like your normal Tonic workflow, just with that file connector. And then when you generate data, I actually can't, I have a expired free trial license. I should see about getting an extended one. But when you generate, those files will be uploaded back here, and you can download the files here. So once you de-identify the files, they're available for you to download the de-identified versions here.
And it does seem like the file upload should be able to happen via API.
Okay, great. Thanks for following up on that. The next one is Upsert. And so this is the very common SQL command update and insert, which sounds pretty simple, but it's really powerful. And the reason is because of the inherent value of the data. If you look at this destination database and this little animation here, this existing database has Alice, David, and Ephraim. So those rows are maybe being used for some use case. They have inherent value. With Upsert, you're able to bring in the additional value that de-identified Tonic gives you while maintaining and preserving whatever existing use cases you have. So you have this database environment where you can't overwrite maybe the destination data because it's a golden test set of data, or it's mock users or test users that don't exist in production. Now we're able to respect and intelligently integrate our data into that environment. So it's a really simple concept, but very powerful under the hood. So in terms of enabling it, it's actually just a workspace setting. You turn it on to say that you want, as the data is written to its destination, to be doing that upserting functionality where it's checking each row to say, is this row exist before? If so, has it changed? And I'll update it. If not, I'll insert it. And then when you run a generation, that's where the option to enable it comes. You know, Paige, I think this is definitely one where like more of a concrete use case would be helpful to understand, you know, where does this fit into a customer's environment?
Yeah, definitely. I think the point you mentioned there about pre-existing test data is really truly the case for a lot of our customers. Some of whom I've spoken to have that in different forms, but a few customers that come to mind. So, for QA teams specifically that interact with Tonic a lot, oftentimes they have these static test users that they've created in lower environments that don't necessarily exist in production at all. And similarly for teams who are building, net new functionality that, again, maybe they don't have existing data in production. This is a new feature that they're working towards. Again, they've created static data or created test data that they used before they had Tonic up and running in their environment. So a lot of different use cases for why they could have this existing test data. But because Upsert protects the destination database and allows Tonic to play much more nicely with this data, we've seen teams more easily be able to integrate Tonic. So both from a time to value perspective in terms of getting Tonic up and running, and then also from an adoption perspective across the entire enterprise. One particular customer that has, different tenants of engineering teams across the org have different varieties of the static test data. And this is actually able to remove a blocker for them to roll out Tonic across the org, since these teams don't have to fully get rid of their existing data. So that's been really nice to see. And then just some other kind of value propositions that have already been useful for customers is the improved uptime for the destination database. Because Upsert's no longer fully destroying the destination, you can still use Tonic and use your destination database at the same time. Where in previous use cases, you maybe had to wait for Tonic to finish running the data generation and fully rebuild that destination before you could actually connect to it and test from it and all of that good stuff that you want to do. So there's really no need to stall interaction or testing with the protected data as the Tonic data is being added. And then in that same vein, you can now combine multiple subsets across generations. And so for that same customer I mentioned earlier, while they have all of these different teams, they do have one large shared QA environment, but now multiple teams can add their Tonic test data into it in one place. And from a cost perspective, that's also great that they now no longer necessarily need to have multiple destination databases for these different use cases for Tonic.
Yeah, there's a lot you said there that I really like. I mean, the uptime part, I don't think I'd necessarily fully ingested that, you get that uptime benefit. And then there's also like the fact that this is kind of a blocker for some customers that they couldn't use Tonic because they had no option but to preserve what they have already. But it's also kind of like the softer aspect of like, people like what they like and they want their data how they want it, and they want their staging environment, or they have these staging environments they built up rich over years, and they're not really ready for Tonic to just write over it. The other thing I really like you said is that like combining it with subset. So I almost misspoke there. It's like we've talked about combining subset and upsert. It could either be subsert or upset. And so if you subset Tonic and very targeted upsert into a destination database, you get like that richness of what was maybe many databases before. Now it's all in one, and you've got all those kind of different isolated data sets. Kiara, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions that have come through. One is, which tiers of Tonic is Upsert available on?
Yes, so it's available as a beta feature. Maybe not today. It'll be in the next few days. This is about to get pushed out. And that'll be only on certain databases. I think that's Postgres, SQL Server, and Oracle. Oracle's on our enterprise tier, so Postgres and SQL Server will be available for professional. And there is some advanced functionality coming out soon that will be available only on the enterprise tier, and that has to do with managing schema changes. So Upsert right now works where you have the same matching schema on both sides, but in the advanced scenario, you can have differing schemas, and we can manage those deltas.
Another question that I think some people might be wondering is if you could explain the difference between Upsert and incremental mode, which is another capability within Tonic.
Yes. So with incremental mode, it really relies on timestamps, and it's at a table level, because really just looking kind of naively at the timestamp and saying, did I already write this before? Or if not, then I'm going to only get these new ones. With Upsert, it can be any column, and it's really at the database level. It can be any foreign key type that you're using to key off of, like maybe the time actually updated, and it's a new time, but it's the same row. And so I don't want to naively just add in that row again, thinking that it's a new row. It's actually kind of an updated row. And so Upsert is a little more intelligently able to do that.
Got it. Thank you. We do have one more question as well about the file connector. The question is, what kind of file types does Tonic support? They have EDI files such as 737, 734, and HL7 files, ADT. I feel like we've heard of EDI before. Not too.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard of EDI and HL7. I'm pretty sure that they are not supported today. It's probably something we could explore. We've got kind of the underpinnings, but, I know we know TXT, CSV, kind of any kind of delimited, separated. I think the EDI may be a little bit more unstructured, but I'm not as familiar with those. So probably something we'd have to add, but it's not something we support out of the box today.
Great, thank you.
And then I was just going to show Upsert, like I mentioned, it's not too interesting as far as a configuration standpoint, but I can at least show you how you do it. Go to my Upsert demo here. So it's in the workspace settings. So it's when you're setting up your source, your destination, you're defining that you're going to enable Upsert at that time. There's a few options here as you're setting that up. And then when you generate, it's just right here, use Upsert, and then when you run it, it will run that generation doing that Upsert functionality, respecting your existing rows. So basically applying that logic. The next one is custom permission sets. So obviously, I mentioned like all of our customers are snowflakes. Everybody's kind of got their own way of doing things. And, the other way I like to think about this is that like Tonic, it's great if Tonic can do everything you want and you have all the power and control to do these interesting operations and transformations. But at the end of the day, there's humans operating this tool. And as Tonic has gotten more powerful, you may not want to give that power to every single person. So you need to be able to segment that control, that access, that scope to each person. And so we've always had roles available in the product as you share workspaces, but they were, Tonic defined. And we are now giving our customers the ability to more granularly define what are those permission sets that each person needs, either at a global level to administer Tonic and access all workspaces, or on a per workspace level to like operate on those. So you can see some examples here. These are the built-in ones that we've always had, these permission sets. But these are two that I've defined that maybe are specific to my business roles. Paige, do you have any examples of how customers are configuring these and kind of adapting Tonic to map to their organization roles and responsibilities?
Yeah, I have two customers in particular that I want to highlight here, but I'd say in general, this one and for me in particular is really exciting for our customers. I think there's been a lot of interest in this. And so, an overwhelming, group of customers has already gotten into this and has seen value from the security and compliance perspective, like you mentioned, Kasey. The ability to limit who has access to the raw source data, and then also granularly control who can make what configurations has been really helpful. One customer in particular, I think they upgraded as soon as this was released, which we always love to see. They created a new set of editor privileges because they wanted to designate users who can configure generators and have all of the access to the source data, but not actually generate data itself. And as we all know, that's the key piece of Tonic that pushes the data to those lower environments. But for this customer in particular, it's very important for their workflows that all of the configurations and masking rules be approved by the security team before the data is available in lower environments and handed off to other teams. So this has been really helpful for them. A different customer, kind of a similar value proposition, but particularly relevant because they have an offshore engineering team. So for them, there's a legal requirement that those folks are not able to view the source data that come in from partners. So they were actually able to set up their own version of a role where they're able to grant access to these folks to configure the generators themselves without viewing that underlying source data, like I mentioned. So they're able to look at the schema information for a particular column or table and make generator configurations or changes, but not actually view the source data. So kind of two sides of the same coin, but really key for customers from a security perspective and also from a flexibility perspective.
Yeah, it's nice that they're able to actually enforce the workflow through the use of these permissions. So there's not necessarily a workflow built in here, but instead of kind of having some offline process where like, first you do this and then pass it to me, is actually just enforced out of the box. which is nice. And the other thing I've seen that is that it enables them to use some of these features, because there was some hesitation from customers to use some of these more advanced features like presets or workspace inheritance when they couldn't control who could do exactly what. And now they're able to do that. And it also enables them to spread the use of Tonic. So you don't just have one centralized person who has to do all of the workspace management. You can kind of empower different people to, collaborate on the configuration of the workspace, that kind of thing.
One more questions that have come in. One about custom permission sets. Is it available on the professional plan?
It is not. Role-based access and granular permissions are part of the enterprise toolkit.
All right, cool. And,
which really makes sense. Just wanted to add on to that, the difference between our professional and enterprise really is like you've got kind of like a few teams or a team using as what professional looks like. And we do have those customers who provide data to the whole organization, but there's only 2 or 3 and they kind of have all the access that they need. Whereas our enterprise plan is really for when you have different teams and all of them have different rules and workspaces and kind of working in their own environments. So it pretty well matches kind of what we see in terms of usage patterns.
Yeah. And then one more question, just a kind of follow up on the HL7 medical file format. Question is around Tonic having HIPAA compliance features or any like contract assurances to help people meet HIPAA regulations.
Yeah, nothing specific in terms of like certification or assurances or anything like that. But we do have, probably 30% of our customers are in the healthcare space. So we have a number of HIPAA types of data that can be detected by Tonic and protected. So one example is that I know there's a rule in HIPAA that the birth date has to be de-identified in a specific way. And so we've got that option on one of our timestamp generators. I think the rule is something like if they're over a certain age, like 80 or 90, then you have to, de-identify that because it's going to be an outlier kind of inherently. So there are some rules that we've built into our different detection and protection sides that will help you be in compliance with HIPAA.
Yeah, I think several generators were built out specifically for Safe Harbor for HIPAA. Maybe there's a HIPAA address generator as well.
Yes, that's right. So I'm in here as an admin in the Tonic settings. There's 2 kinds of permission sets. There's global permission sets, which kind of run things like being able to do admin or configure presets or workspace defaults, maybe the jobs, system status, upgrading Tonic, that kind of thing. Things that are in their admin user today out of the box. And then there's workspace permission sets. That's the one I'm going to demonstrate now. So I've got this, this is a real request from a customer, ability to be an editor, but not to view any of the data. So I want to be able to add configurations because I know the schema and I know how we should protect the data, but I shouldn't have any access to see it. And so you can see in terms of the options, the only thing I've allowed this person to do is to configure column generators, resolve schema changes, and run the sensitivity scan. So that's just to detect what's sensitive, but not to run any generations. Cannot preview the source data or preview the destination data. There's none of that preview available. So that's already been configured. So I was just showing that. And then I have shared a workspace with myself where I had that data-free editor. And so now I have that data-free editor permission here. I don't have table view because table view is the one that shows you all of your data, but I do have database view, which allows me to see the schema. So I can see things like this address ID. I can apply a generator, like an integer key generator, but this preview button where I used to be able to see source or destination data, I can't do that, but I can still go through and configure, that this is an address and it's a city and, apply those settings, still do comments, things like that. And that's kind of, again, just narrowing into exactly the operation that I need to perform there. Okay, I'm going to go on to the last big feature we have to share with you today, and that's generator presets. So you may remember that a first version of this came out, I believe we talked about it in our March webinar launch, but we have really expanded the functionality here, and I'm really excited about it. So the general gist is that generators are the building blocks of Tonic. These are the transformations that you apply to de-identify your data. but they have a lot of power, which can also mean a lot of, overwhelm of optionality. So lots of clicks, lots of decisions. So things like, should I turn consistency on or off? Should I turn differential privacy on or off? What are maybe the other data fields? Like if I have a timestamp, what are the ranges that I want that timestamp to be in to be valid? So with generator presets, I can get exactly the configuration I want. I can save it, and then I can even name it and have different versions depending on different columns that are available in my business. So really kind of creating presets for your business rules that are specific to the entities that you need to protect. The other thing that I really like about it, sort of the sleeper hit, is that like not only is it making me more efficient when I'm applying all of these generators, but there's a view here that I've shown here that lets me see how all of the generators are used across all workspaces. So how many, this address generator is being used 42 times. I can also see how many times someone has overridden what the defaults are. So maybe they're using it in a different way. Maybe it's out of compliance. I can kind of narrow in on how is that generator being used in that workspace. So it really gives you that global view of like, how consistently am I applying my policies, my rules, what kinds of data am I protecting across the organization? This is actually one I know a lot of our customers are really excited about because it just makes them so much more efficient at their job. But I'm wondering if you have any examples, Paige, about how are they actually using this? Any specific data types they're kind of using to customize for themselves?
Yeah, definitely. I think, what you said really resonates for me, that a lot of our customers, as you can see, inspired by some on the slide here, have been using generator presets for months now and have already extracted value from, that high level perspective. But I do really want to focus on some of the expanded functionality that's been revamped and improved over the past few months, and talk through how that's been useful. So as I think we can all agree, nobody wants to spend hours and hours, reconfiguring or redoing work as you're setting it up. I think specifically inside the Tonic UI, as you're applying a lot of generators, that's particularly true. One customer that I've worked with was in the boat to potentially have to do that. They have hundreds of columns in a very denormalized database. So there were a lot of slight variations between columns that looked similar, but probably needed iterations of the same generator, and a lot of care and kind of attention to detail from that perspective. So as soon as this an improved version of generator presets came out, we ramped up with this customer quickly to get them up to speed on how to use this. A lot of their columns in particular required some of our more complex generators to set up. So for example, the regex generator, the conditional generator, or even custom categorical, where you as the user have a lot of control over what the generator looks like, as compared to say like our name generator, for example, which is pretty simple and easy to apply. This customer was spending a lot of time fine tuning those complicated generators. So in working with them, there and the ability to be able to save multiple presets of the same type of generator really helped reduce that duplicative work across those different generators. So, there was some time up front to look at all of the different types of variations in each column and craft a preset that was associated with it. But once those were set up, it was really plug and play in terms of applying those generators, which you can do, through the UI directly or programmatically using our API. So really useful for that particular customer, felt like a great win for them. And then Kasey, as you mentioned, the ability to track the occurrences of each generator is also really valuable from a compliance standpoint. It helps our customers ensure that the data output adheres to the same standards of these different types of generator presets, and make it really quickly, identifiable if one particular generator is misaligned with the rest of the data set.
Yeah, and I mean, I think like we talked a lot about flexibility, but it's also like a lot about at scale. So it's like it's fine if you're just configuring a few, but it's also like, what about if you're doing hundreds of columns, and what if you have lots of workspaces? So it's flexibility and scale.
You mentioned workspaces. That's a question that I have. Are generator presets workspace specific, or can they work across workspaces?
They work across workspaces. So that's great because like a lot of the rules that you're creating for maybe this data set are going to need to be applied consistently for others. You don't want to have to go back, or it's sort of the copy paste functionality. Instead of copying all my generator settings here, I don't have to, manually recreate them. I can just have them in the drop down. So I'm actually going to show a regex as well as a few others. So let me go to one where I have permissions to do this. Okay, so there's two places you can create presets. You can do it from that overview page that I was showing you. But I think one of the most concrete ways to understand it is kind of right here within the, table view. So let's say I want to do a custom categorical. So I like custom categorical because basically creating like a custom dictionary. So maybe I want to put in our names here, Kiara, Paige, Kasey, and I want to create a new preset for that. And I'm going to call it my August demo names list. And I want basically anytime I use this option, it's going to pre-populate with any names from that. So I could do it here. I could actually look for August, and there it is. I can just quickly apply that. So that's kind of a cool one. I actually also have a example of a regex, which I'm going to try to demo here on the fly. So regex to be able to parse maybe this email address in a kind of more granular way. So the regex expression here, which one of my solution architects helpfully provided me today, helps me parse this email address into components, right? So I'm like looking at, there's a name, there's an @ and there's a domain. Let's say for the name or the email address part, I actually want to follow a standard and I just want to use like last name, and I want to make everything last name at, whatever the domain is. So I can save that. And then now I can create a new generator preset, and I'm going to call it last name email. And so now I don't have to know regex to be able to apply that. The next time I can just select, last name email is one of the drop-down options there. So that's pretty cool. And like I mentioned, you could also do that with any options on any generator. So you can either update the baseline, and so that every single time that we use a particular generator, differential privacy is always on, or you can kind of create a named one because maybe you have different rules that apply at different times. So it's kind of choose your flavor at either level. So that is all of our headline features that we were going to share with you today. But there's been a lot of work across the board, at Tonic. So we've always been expanding more on our connector side, not just more options like Vertica, but also more configurations within our supported connectors. So we've been doing a lot of work, actually, it's not even listed here, on Databricks. We now support Snowflake and Azure. So, really expanding those data warehouses and the features and functionality that we offer on those. The usage report, I really like a lot. It lets you see, it's sort of like the privacy report, but for your jobs and generations to see how many rows and columns and you've been de-identifying over time. So you can kind of get that. We have customers who are wanting to do that to maybe monitor their own usage across teams or for chargebacks to kind of allocate costs and resourcing to figure out who's getting the most value out of Tonic. We have versioned our API. That's a new setting you can do. And, done some other updates as far as like generators. That's kind of always ongoing.
Slide has sparked a couple of questions around the databases that we support. The first question is, which databases were used for the demos, and are these features available for Databricks?
That's a good question. I probably use Postgres just because that's the one that we deploy internally for our application database. So that's the one that I usually use as like a sample database. Like I mentioned, it really kind of varies by database. Obviously, file connector is not, that's not relevant here. But like Upsert is available, SQL Server, Postgres, maybe MySQL and Oracle. A lot of these other features, it kind of varies. Usage reports would be available on all of them. Generator presets would be available on all of them. Yeah, I'd have to like kind of look by file. We have a section in our documentation that says limitations by feature. So if you go into the docs and look at Databricks limitations, it'll kind of list out. One example is that data warehouse filtering is the version of subsetting that's available for data warehouses. Subsetting is usually not a relevant use case for data warehouses because they're not making use of foreign keys and don't have a lot of relationships. And so we filter all of those tables, and that's kind of a native feature that data warehouses offer that we're able to take advantage of to minimize your data footprint. It just has a little bit different functionality.
I've got that link. I'll put it in the chat for the differences and limitations with Databricks, just so you know what features aren't available in Databricks. The other question, and I believe the answer is yes, not even on the roadmap, is AWS Redshift on the roadmap? We currently do support Redshift. Anything else you want to add to that, Kasey?
Yeah, nothing specific that is missing that I know of in Redshift. So if there's a specific feature that we have that you are not sure of, again, there's going to be limitations on what's available in Redshift now, but happy to expand on it. We do have a pretty healthy Redshift offering as well as Databricks. So, we've really seen a lot of uptick in usage as customers are migrating more and more to data warehouses for different use cases. So happy to be a part of that. And with the time left, I was going to share a little bit about our roadmap. And, it's still going to be a little bit of a tease. This is just the version that I'm sharing externally, but I'm happy to sit with any of our customers and walk through kind of at a more detailed level about some of the features. I can tell you what's not on here. We actually are continuing to expand our core, things like DynamoDB to really solidify our offering in the NoSQL semi-structured data space. So that core is going to get better and better in terms of how we're enabling de-identification at scale. There's some new features coming with respect to bulk de-identification, bulk generator application, more kind of automatic suggestions, and more dashboards that kind of build on that usage report and let you have more of an insight into the value that you're getting. The next two are really big areas for us. And we've actually been through a lot. There's a lot going on in the economy for the last 6 months, as well as at Tonic and with our customers. So we are rapidly expanding our product offering. And we have some new areas I'm excited to tell you a little bit about today, but happy to dig more into with any of our customers to understand your needs. The first area is around test workflows. So we've realized at Tonic that beyond just populating fake data in your database, there are a lot of areas where you need to take advantage of complex, sensitive data. And we're very good at managing complex, sensitive data. So we are exploring new products in integration testing, unit testing, helping you manage your environments, containerizing the output, and really getting more deeply embedded into that CI/CD pipeline. So that's the first lever. The other lever is, of course, generative AI is like the hot topic. And beyond just using generative AI within our own product to make it better, smarter, faster, we are actually building new products to help customers apply generative AI to their own data problems. So one of those is around safe enterprise search. So again, we're very good at connecting to your data sources and protecting what needs to be protected. So we have a new product, Answers, that is has signups for private beta available right now. And we have another product where we're helping customers to fine tune their LLMs. So, these are kind of just the start, kind of the next step beyond core Tonic. We have a big vision ahead of us in terms of end-to-end solutions to really continue to be your data platform, data consumption platform, to make data responsibly accessible to the rest of your organization. So on that note, I will leave you with our email. You are welcome to get in touch with us on any of these. Like I said, if you're a customer, reach out to product, your customer success manager. I'm happy to meet and share in more detail what the roadmap looks like, get your input on some of these new test products or in the generative AI space. And the Answers product right here is where you can sign up for the private beta for that new generative AI product.
Awesome. Thank you, Kasey. We do still have time if anyone has any final questions about any of the roadmap items or some of the other features that we kind of did a roundup of. I don't see any questions currently. Let me just double check. Check in the chat.
I'm going to put those links into the, I'm not sure if I can understand the chat, but can you put those links into the chat or?
Yes, yeah, you got it. Oh, no, here. Hold on. I got it. There we go. Everybody's
Thank you.
seeing it now. Yeah. We do have one more question. Is Azure Cosmos DB supported?
That is not supported right now. Interested to hear about the use case, but no, it's not one we've heard requested too much.
So that'd be a great example.
I know it's.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, reach out to hello@Tonic, and we'd love to hear more about that use case.
Yeah. Yeah, I know it's in the NoSQL space. So, I think we're pretty well positioned because of our Mongo and our Dynamo and DocumentDB. So we do have an understanding of like other like databases, but it's not a specific one that we've explored. So definitely excited to dig in if there's a strong use case there or need.
Excellent. All right, last call for questions. I've loved all the questions. So many great questions that came through today. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Kasey and Paige, for all of your expertise and insight. And again, thanks everyone for the questions. Like I said, we love them. If you have any additional questions about any of our latest releases or our expanded testing solutions, like Kasey mentioned, just reach out to us at hello@Tonic.ai. And if you're interested in learning more about what we're building in the generative AI space, the best place to go right now is to visit Tonic.ai/answers, where you can sign up to get beta access. Thank you again, and we look forward to seeing everyone at our next event.